Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
Healing. I have stories that I've told before, so for those of you who have known me in the past, you may have heard the stories, but they're the stories that have informed how I understand healing. I had the blessing so for those of you who know, New Thought is a healing teaching. That's how it arose. So it arose in the 1800s, and it was first about healing the body, and then after that, it really started expanding into other areas that people needed healing. Money was one of them, relationships. But the whole modality is we're here to be healed. And so we have a group of people in this is Centers for Spiritual Living, the organization we're in, and within Centers for Spiritual Living, there is this group of people called practitioners, and they are the healing arm of the church. So as this is a healing teaching, they're actually practicing. Gingers, I forgot. So we have these practitioners who do this healing work with all of us. So even when you're a practitioner or a minister, you still go to a practitioner because we're here to be healed. So I was in practitioner studies, training, while I was working in a psychiatric hospital. So I was very heightened, this idea of healing. That's why I keep returning to those stories, because this is really what I was focused in on at the time. So there was one time where I worked in two different hospitals. I was working at the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute, and I was on the teen unit, and there was two teenagers that came in, and I've never seen anything like this before, because it was so strange that they both came in at the same time, and it's the only time I experienced it, which is neither one of them could keep food in their stomach. And it was not an eating disorder where they were bulimia. They literally, physically, no food would stay in their stomach. So they had gotten thinner and thinner and thinner, and to the point where it was getting dangerous. But they were trying to figure out where to put them, and they decided to put them in a psychiatric hospital just to see if there was any sort of psychiatric part, mental part to their stomach not being able to hold food. So they were both around the same age, early teens. They were put on different sides of the unit. And when I worked at the hospital, I was a mental health worker. I usually had about 6 people that I would work with per shift. But when this young girl came in, they said, she's in so much danger, we need someone to be with her 24/7. So I would spend my full shift with her for the 8 hours, other than breaks. And so she couldn't move very much. She slept a lot because she had no energy. So they had a tube in both of these young girls that bypassed their stomach just to start bringing nutrients. They had been so malnourished. And they had so little weight on their body that just lying down in the bed hurt. Everything hurt to be touched because they had no in-between. It was their skin. And so when she woke up, she'd just be, and so it's heart-wrenching to hear a young girl just in so much physical pain. And I was in practitioner training, and at the time I was reading a book called Principles of Healing by H.B. Jeffries, which was one of our books for the training. And so what he taught was what we teach in New Thought. So I was immersed in this book, and so what that is we are made in the image and likeness of pure spirit. Pure spirit is everywhere. It's infinite. There's no place where it stops and something else begins. It is in, through, and as all creation, but it's beyond creation. So nothing in creation can ever hurt it, can ever limit it. It is always whole, perfect, and complete. It's not sometimes whole, perfect, and complete. It doesn't come, it doesn't go. It is here now. It's at the center of all of our being. The spiritual essence of every one of us is wholeness, is perfection. There's nothing missing. We can't add on to it because it already has everything that it needs. It is already fully realized. It is already fully enlightened. It is pure enlightenment. If enlightenment is a word you like to use, it's pure heaven, if that's a word you use. Whatever that is for that highest state that you have in your mind, that's what it already is, and it's that all of the time. And it has always been that. It has never not been that. So a lot of what we do in New Thought, the way the healing process works, is you turn away from the condition So he would say, turn away from the person who's in pain, and that's the appearance, and hold to the invisible truth that you can't see, but hold to that wholeness and perfection, and just stay there, because you're not making that happen through effort. You're not like, I'm forcing to know. I'm putting my intention on that which already exists. I am turning away illusion of separation, of duality, of not enoughness, of dis-ease, and I am turning my intention to that truth that is ultimate truth, that is absolute truth, wholeness and perfection. And I sustain my intention there. So I was spending 8 hours with this young girl, holding my attention there. I didn't turn away from her. When she's in pain, I'm there to care for her and make sure she's okay and talk with her when she's able to talk. And so it's not that I dismiss. It's not like when you say turn away, it's like, well, screw her. I'm just going to hold. No, because it can seem cold. I'm just saying sometimes when you read the writing, it's not cold. You do both. You meet someone where they are, love them, nurture them, have empathy, but inwardly always staying, and you're whole, perfect, and complete. There's nothing wrong with you. That can seem like almost harsh. So you don't say it out loud. You're just saying it inside. I know you're whole, perfect, and complete. I know nothing has ever hurt, harmed, or endangered you ever. That you are, whatever's going on in your body, that's not the truth of your being. You might hear that. It's not the truth of your being. And that which is you're experiencing, whatever is causing that, is dissolving into the nothingness from which it came. There's nothing to support disease, because that's not an ultimate truth. Every temporary experience is temporary. So I'm holding that everything that is created, this is dissolving into the nothingness, so only wholeness and perfection can reveal itself. And so it was very wonderful 3 weeks later to walk in and see this young girl jumping up and down the hallways. Vitality had restored to her body. She was just her, and lightness of being. She's smiling, she's laughing, she's just pure joy. Now, it wasn't just me. She came from a family of people who believed in prayer, so they were praying for her. She had this community praying for her. There's like this web of prayer holding the truth. And we all had different ways of praying and understanding, but it's still the same idea. And then I became aware of the whole time I was just so immersed in this world, I didn't ever visit the girl on the cross. She wasn't ever assigned to me, and I was really focused. The young girl on the other side of the hall, I knew her parents were agnostic and atheist, and there's nothing, this is not anything against that. I come from a family who I love and are fabulous and powerful people, and also agnostic and atheist, only to say that there wasn't a lot of prayer happening around her. And she ended up getting worse and worse and worse, and did have to go to the ICU. It wasn't turning around. This is not scientific fact. I'm not talking about this is the truth. I'm just saying in this one little anecdote, this was my experience. My perception is that prayer really made a huge difference. And when we're just sort of treated only at the level of our material body, it doesn't always go the way, isn't helped by that spiritual truth. So but that story that I told, I'm saying that's a one little anecdote, but what you'll find, and some already know, is that when people start learning these principles and practicing it, there's stories like this all the time. People have extraordinary healings, where things that seemed unhealable or uncurable are just like suddenly healed, whole, perfect, and complete. That spiritual principle is revealed. Healing has happened. And that's the power of this teaching. That's the power of what we walk. And also. I'm an and also person. While I was in this training, I also had this other experience. There was a gentleman in the spiritual community in which I lived who had a very painful physical issue. And so this is a big community, got everyone praying up for him, went into surgery, and it had already been healed. It was cured. He was cured. It was extraordinary. Woohoo! Did you hear about him? He was cured. It was great. When he came into my office, What I found was the patterns that he had as a person were still there, however. He was a very abrasive guy, aggressive, a little bit arrogant. So my and often other people's response to him was to withdraw, to sort of constrict a little because you had all this very abrasive energy coming at you. And the cure that he had made him a little bit more arrogant, like, look what happened to me. At the same time, again, I'm in practitioner training, we're working on death and dying, and I was given the book, we had a choice, and I picked the book Grace and Grit, which is by Treya Wilbur and Ken Wilber. I never heard of either one of them at the time. I was just drawn to the book, started reading it. Turns out Ken Wilber has this whole integral theory, and he's quite looked up to by many people. So in his writing is very clarifying, and it helped me, but the book was really full of Treya's words. So to start with the end, Treya was diagnosed with breast cancer 10 days after they were married, and 5 years later she transitioned to the other side. So I'm reading this book, and it's so full of her journals, and I'm just falling in love with her. Extraordinary woman. They were both on the spiritual journey before they ever met, and it just got deeper and deeper as she was dealing with this breast cancer. And by the end, just the intensity of her spiritual life was moving. I just read it. It was magnetized towards her. And it was beautiful. And she actually changed my life. I would say, in terms of doing my spiritual practices, and how I did them, Yogananda was my first teacher. She was definitely my second teacher. And then I remember exactly where I was when I was reading, when she transitioned. I've never met her, but I just sat. I was on the floor of my bedroom apartment, leaning up against my bed in West Hollywood, and I just sobbed and sobbed. So it was like the most beautiful. It was both grieving and just in awe of her consciousness, of her beauty. And so, of course, I'm asking myself, because I'm in practitioner training, what is healed? His body was cured. This gentleman was cured, but he was still I constricted around him, and with her, I was not only opened, I was transformed. I actually changed my life. Who was healed? What is healing? And so we started having these conversations, and I think they're more common today, but the differentiating between cure and healing. That often, like when I looked up healing, it was a lot of physical healing, but often what we're talking about is something that has a beginning and an end. I get a scratch on my knee, it's going to cure, it's going to be cured, it's probably going to heal, and it'll probably do it by itself. Our body's amazing. But maybe, like I broke my foot, I went to a doctor who gave me a cast and created a context for my foot to heal. So it did its healing, and the doctors helped. It's all part of God. There's no place where God stops and something else begins. So to be clear, when I talk about how we heal, it's not like this young girl. She was in a hospital. It's not like doctors. We're not Christian scientists. I have to make that clear. It's a both and. We want the cures. When I had my broken foot, yes, I wanted it to be cured, and I would have loved to have an instantaneous cure, but I didn't. I had to have a cast. But we're also healing. Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living, has this great quote. There's nothing to be healed, only God to be revealed, right? There's nothing to be healed, only God to be revealed. Because, just going right back to what I was saying, that the divine is already whole, perfect, and complete. So the more we are revealing this wholeness and this perfection, we don't need healing because now there's nothing that's dis-ease, there's nothing that's cut off. So I held on to this idea, and I believe it. But God is infinite. That means healing is infinite. It doesn't have an endpoint. Cure has an endpoint. We know when we've been cured, healing might be a little more ambiguous. Shunryu Suzuki said something very interesting to me because I became very interested in enlightenment. And some student asked him, when I become enlightened, will I stop having problems? When I realize God, will I stop having problems? And Shunryu Suzuki said no. That was it. That's all he said. I'm like, can you elaborate on that? No, enlightenment is not going to take away all your problems because we are still finite beings. So what is healing? What is cure? They interplay. So the gentleman who had the cure, he was also healed. So the way I look at healing is we have a healing when we've shifted into a place of peace around something. If we're anxious about something, about anything, whether it's money, relationships, our work life, my child, my parent, my friend, what's happening, whatever, what's happening in the world, any place where I'm feeling anxiety, stress, hurt, pain, I am not healed yet in that area. And so the healing is when I start to feel peace, when I'm not when I'm not moved by it as much. So I'm sure this gentleman who had the cure of his physical, he also had a healing. My bet is he was anxious about this physical thing that happened to him, and after the cure, he wasn't anxious. He felt good. He was peaceful. So he did have a healing. It's not that he didn't. He also had a cure. But the question is did he stop there? So Yogananda who was by a Hindu spiritual teacher who came over to the States to teach Kriya Yoga. And when he first started working, he used to heal people a lot. But he stopped because he said what happened is when people would get the healing, and this is healing in terms of cure in the body, they would actually stop their spiritual journey. They would stop being curious. And the whole reason why he was doing the healing was for people to open up and realize how extraordinary God is, and it was like an initiation. Like, this is your initiation into like how amazing Spirit is and you want more. And they weren't interested in what's more. They just wanted the healing. So he stopped doing it except for the students who were already fully engaged. It reminded me of... there's a professor, Kyriakos Makidis, he's from Greece, but he's a sociology professor in University of Maine, and he was agnostic. But as a professor, you have to get published, so he went to Cyprus, because he knew the language, because there was this body of people who were healers, and he wanted to study them just from an academic point of view. And he tried to maintain his distance, but he said it was pretty awe-inspiring, some of the cures and healings that he saw. And so as he was there, people were like, well, have you seen these guys on Mount Athos? And so the guys on Mount Athos are Orthodox Christians. So he went as a sociology professor and went there to study what they were doing. What was interesting is they also were vehicles of people's healings and cures, but that wasn't their purpose. It was in the context of something much greater. So this is what I'm trying to get to about what healing is. There can be a healing of the body, there can be a healing of something, and it's an initiation process onto a great journey of healing that is never ending, because we are always God, the divine presence, this infinite presence, is constantly unfolding and revealing itself in our being in infinite ways. We are infinite beings, and so we will always be healing. It's not, I think there's this idea of if I'm healed, I always get nervous when someone says I'm healed. Julian used to say that when he was a kid. I'm healed, hallelujah. But if I'm healed, sounds like it's an ending process, but it's so much more compassionate with ourselves when we realize this is an ongoing process that's joyful, because every time we have anything that's healed, any little thing, if it's a little thing, big thing, we return to ourself, we return to our true nature, and that's joyous, and we feel lighter, and we feel freer, and then people go, oh, but something else came up. Yes, that's part of this journey. We're not here, we're finite beings. We just never get away from that. So it's learning how to live as healing as a way of life. Healing as an incredibly loving, tender way to live our life, so we're not constantly beating ourselves up for not being healed. Well, I'm spiritual. I've been on this path for decades. Why am I having this problem? I shouldn't have this problem. I should be healed by now. You know, I gave the beginning example of this young woman. Well, I'll just say that in a minute. So I was looking at healing, what healing is, and it comes in different forms. And to recognize that all these are forms of healings. One is the absolute spontaneous healing. Immediate, transform, you're just, whatever is issues having, it's gone. That is extraordinary, that's amazing, and it happens. So when I was at the hospital, that did happen. There was times where I was working with somebody, and it would be an immediate, lights, everything, just shift, and it's gone. Immediate, instant healing. There were healings like I did with the young girl, where you're working with someone, and it takes time. So for her, it was like 3 weeks of just praying and knowing, and then that specific issue that she was dealing with, and hopefully that whatever caused that issue in the first place was also healed. I always go to first cause, whatever the cause is, that's healed. I think of Myrtle Fillmore, who's one of the founders of Unity. She had tuberculosis in the 1800s. Doc Holliday, she lived at the exact same time as Doc Holliday, and we know, in the 1800s, tuberculosis was they didn't have a cure for it. But she used this healing that I was describing earlier of knowing her wholeness, and she would go through her whole body. It would take her a long time. She was very methodically, every day, go through her whole body knowing that it's whole, perfect, and complete. There's no disease, there's nothing wrong with me. And she would do that. It took her 2 years, so that's a long healing. But she did it. She became cured of tuberculosis. Didn't mean she didn't have other challenges in her life. That's always why I go the and also. It's an extraordinary healing. She lived till she was 80. She was vital, but it didn't mean that therefore she had no problems the rest of her life. She had to heal other areas of her life. And healing means just bring God consciousness into other areas of her life. The more we know God, the more we're going to bring. And when you go to the other side of the veil, as Treya Wilbur did, she was healed, and she actually came to me one time and gave me very clear guidance. Exactly, I totally needed her guidance on this, and it was different than I think the guidance she would have given to me when she lived here. So I was thinking, oh, she's continued to evolve on the other side. Sometimes we think death is a failure. It's not. If someone has a chronic illness, that's not a failure. That's part of someone's journey. That's essential to discover who they are. So we have these walls of where we think, well, they're healed. Well, that means that they're not healed. Go beyond the appearances. I had a classmate in practitioner training who had, I think it was MS. And so slowly he went from walking to cane to wheelchair. And it was very hard for him to be in this teaching. And he talked very openly about it. He said, sometimes, it just gets to me. He says, sometimes I take my fists and I pound my legs, like, why can't you get this? You're whole, perfect, and complete. Get out of me. And yet the journey he went on to discover his wholeness that integrated what he was going through. Everybody went to him as a practitioner because he had such an extraordinary healing consciousness. He was extraordinary. In fact, he transitioned years ago, and someone just put, I'm just thinking about Ron today, and everybody just started writing, yes, yes, yes. Oh, his name's Ron. I just made that connection. Whole, perfect, and complete. That is everybody all of the time. Let's get our judgments out of there. Anyone who works in the hospital is an and also person, because I told you the story that matched our teaching, but there were plenty of stories that didn't. So there's people that are healed instantly. There are people that it takes time. And then there are people, there's this one woman, she went through, her story was so hard and traumatic, awful. And when I would go to visit her, she turned it all into this incredible work of art. She was a writer, and so every day, the first person I would go to when I got on the unit, I would go and say, how are you doing? And I would know she would give me a piece of writing that would just open my heart, send me into another place. My bet is that trauma was so severe that it's going to be either years of her walking out, or she might have it the rest of her life in some level. She's having that as part of, just like someone has a chronic illness, that's something that might be working with her. But she had learned to turn it into a work of art, into something beautiful. It wasn't about being cured, like having an endpoint where that trauma stops impacting her. where it shows up in all these different dimensions, creating something utterly beautiful and stunning with it. And she was a magnet for my soul. I was healed being around her beautiful soul. So sometimes healing isn't instant. Sometimes it's not even long-term. It's just turned into a work of art or a work of service. So I think of Wilma Rudolph, who had polio. Poor family. I'm not going to go to the whole story. She's an amazing story. Look it up. Had polio, but through constant work, she had crutches and told she probably was never going to walk again. And spoiler alert, she became the fastest woman in the world and won the Olympics gold medal. Extraordinary story of how she worked with her legs. Same time period, Franklin Delano FDR, Roosevelt, thank you for laughing. He also had polio. He stayed in a wheelchair, was a little embarrassed by it, but some people might say he did some good things for our country. Everybody's journey is different, and how dare us judge somebody else's journey based on appearances. Our whole teaching is to get out of the world of appearances. It is none of my business. I'm only here to see you as already whole, perfect, and complete, however that's showing up. So even this gentleman who I found abrasive, my job is to see you are already whole, perfect, and complete. I am not there to hold him in contempt for not being the way I think he needs to be as a healed person. My job is to see that whole, perfect, and complete person. Healing. It's so deep. And I love what Joel Goldsmith says, that as we heal even the obvious stuff, then you just get the layers and the layers and like it gets more and more subtle, and little things bother you in the way that they didn't bother you before because you didn't see them. But as you heal them, new things show up. It's fun. So this topic is here today because we're going into our holiday season. And family, it can be family if you're with family. I heard just this year was the first time I heard it, there's some people who are calling it Friendsgiving, where people get together with their friends, so family, friends. But often this is a time where people start to get triggered. No matter how much work you've done, bam, it's there. Or there's people who are by themselves, and that can be a trigger. Look at everyone's with their families and getting triggered. I wish I was getting triggered. I'm by myself. I'm lonely, I'm sad, I don't feel like I belong. There's so much pain out there, showing up in so many different ways. So how do we address this? I'm just addressing for people who might get triggered by family or some situation during the holidays. Well, healing is a long process for many people, especially emotional healing, especially family healing. You may have a miracle and an instant healing where everything is fine, and it's like, oh, it's like a whole other family. We all are perfect and whole and complete, and that may happen. I'm never denying that. I've seen it and I've experienced it. I know it's possible. I don't know why it happens sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. Those, for me anyways, the instant miracles happen, but not nearly as very rarely compared to everybody else. It's why people who work in hospitals do the and also, because we see everything. We can't just include some people, include everybody. Anyway, or you might have been doing a lot of work with your family or whatever this trigger is, and you've been a lot of work and you're not that triggered this year because you've done a lot of work. But what do you do when you've done a lot of work and you're still triggered? And you're going to be. You know that no matter what you do, no matter how well you craft your sentences, or you're not going to talk about this, or you're not going to bring up this topic, whatever you do, you know it's still going to be a place where you get tweaked, where it's going to be a challenge. And what I would say is just, at the very least, I was going to ask people what healing was to them. And I forgot, I'm sorry. But I did ask Julian what healing meant to him. And so I loved his answer. I said, Julian, what does healing mean to you? And he said, healing means to me doing the inner work and caring about yourself just as you would care for another. Boy, I love that boy. Caring about ourselves. So when we are going into whatever the situation is, whatever that might be a trigger, and I'm talking about Thanksgiving, it could be anything, work, anything. Care about yourself. Healing starts with us. Make sure every day, throughout whatever especially if it's a very focused trigger, like you're with family, make sure you are taking care of yourself. Walk away when you need to. Do your spiritual practices as much as you can. And I'm going to offer an easy spiritual practice to do, especially now that we have phones. And some of you may have done this. This was a big spiritual practice in the 80s and 90s, but it's kind of faded. And I'm like, oh, we got it. It just kept coming to me from different directions all week, so I know I'm supposed to tell you about it. And even if you've already done it a million times, I'm asking you, if you have a place that's triggered, it's such a great just to take care of yourself. Mirror work. How many of you have done mirror work? So many of you, that's so great. So this is just a reminder. So mirror work is when we look in the mirror and we affirm what we want to affirm. So one of my favorites, it was the first one that was given to me, and it was amazing, to do it 30 times a day. 30 times, that's either all at once or 10 times, 3 times a day. Looking in the mirror and say, I, Harriet, am loving. I, Harriet, am lovable. I, Harriet, am love. I, Harriet, am loving. Of course, you're saying your own name. Or you could say it about me. I say your name. I, Harriet, am loving. I, Harriet, am lovable. I, Harriet, am love. And the reason why we do 30 times is because it takes time to break away our defense barriers even from ourselves. We even create little blocks from ourselves to receive love. This is all about your own inner work. And so the thing we have now are phones, so you don't even need a mirror. You can just look at your phone and say, except it keeps going dark. I love myself. Hey, it went dark. I and your name. So my invitation for all of us, no matter if we've all done it a million times, 30 times every day from today until next Sunday, looking in I actually like the mirror more than the phone because it's bigger. And say the affirmation, I am loving, I am lovable, and I am love. Nobody can ever take that away from you. Nobody, no condition, no circumstance, no family member, no past trauma, because you are standing in the absolute truth of your being. Nothing that has ever happened to you ever takes away from this truth, that you are love itself. No one, nothing, past or present, can ever take that from you. And so the mirror work is to remind ourselves of this truth every day. So if you are someone who's going into the holidays with some trepidation, there might be plenty of valid, of course, reasons, because a lot of our pain buttons were created when we were little. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. And so finally, and I've said this before, but I think it's important to remember, one of the things, especially for people on the spiritual journey, because we are infinite being and because we know it's never ending, we forget to be grateful, not just for what we have, but be grateful to yourself for all the work you've already done. You're not here if you haven't done work on yourself, period. You wouldn't be in this room. You wouldn't be online. If you haven't, and even people who aren't here, it's not that, if you're in your life and you're a baby, first of all, everyone's had the cuts on their knees that nobody's helped them. It's just healed on its own, right? We've all experienced cures, amazing cures. Things, I don't know, when you were a kid, do you remember watching how your body just healed itself? Like, weren't you in awe when you were a kid? Like, wow, how does it know how to do that? And I'm not doing anything. I'm just watching it, and in 2 days it's healed. That healing power. You have gone through challenges in your life. And yes, we will be doing this for the rest of our life, and there's always more work to be done. But please, as you're doing the mirror work about love, do gratitude work toward yourself. Harriet, I have to stop using my name, but I don't know what other name to use. Say your name. I'm going to use Jerry because Jerry doesn't mind. Jerry. I always know. Christine, Kim, Marcy. Oh, let's go through everybody. I feel like the romper room. Anyway, my mind going. Thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for going to a therapist and really listening to your heart. Thank you for doing the physical therapy that you needed to do to heal something. Thank you for going to a 12-step program and really giving yourself to the 12 steps for your healing. Thank you. Thank yourself. Love yourself and thank yourself. You've already done so much work. Be grateful. Be grateful. Be grateful. You are awesome beings. You are incredible for what you have done. This is a very hard life that many people have had. Be grateful for the work that you've done in the midst of big challenges, emotional challenges, physical challenges, mental challenges, spiritual challenges. You have shown up and done the work. Thank you. This is Thanksgiving. Start with yourself. Start with yourself. Thank yourself. Love yourself. Take care of yourself through this whole holiday season. And we'll know what it's like to be in heaven in the midst of growth, constant growth and expansion and challenges and difficulties. There I am. The peace, the love, the joy. Let's pray. So let's start with gratitude as we remember Suzanne's beautiful song at the beginning of the service. Christine's beautiful prayer. Just take it all in, just so much gratitude for this presence that has been so active in our life already. Every one of us, it's here, it's now, it's as each and every one of us, not in each of us, as each of us. There's no separation where it stops and something else begins. It is who we are now, this love, this peace, this creativity, this abundance, this health, this wholeness, this bliss, this joy. It is already who we are. We are not making it happen. It is beyond all time, all space, all phenomena, existence. It is. It is. And we are. It is. We are. And how grateful I am for all that we have shown up for ourselves, of knowing this, for all the affirmations we've ever done, the vision boards, the mirror work, the working with practitioners, the working with therapists, the working with healing modalities, Reiki, yoga, all of the different healing modalities. Thank you. Thank you for showing up and caring about yourself, ourselves, each and every one of us. Thank you. Thank you. And we continue to hold and know that this healing work, this love, this tenderness of returning to our wholeness is a joyful journey, because every day we're having a moment of returning more to ourselves than ever before, and we feel it and we know it, and we just say, thank you, God. I'm freer today because I've returned to myself. I feel more love than I felt in a long time because I've returned to myself, to my true self, to my absolute self, to the I am that I am. Thank you for returning over and over and over again. And thank you for the continued growth. Thank you for the continued love in the midst of that growth. We are all healers and revealers of divine light, of divine truth, of a divine wisdom. And I know that as we go forth into this week, into whatever our Thanksgiving holidays look like, and it's unique for every one of us, we carry this self-love, this self-gratitude, this self-awareness and appreciation into every situation. We let go of how we think things should be, and we celebrate what is. Just in this moment, we let go of all of our judgments and preconceptions of what's supposed to be, and just celebrate who we are authentically, who we are authentically in the midst of all of it. And for those who have wonderful, wonderful plans to look forward to, who aren't triggered, we celebrate with you. We celebrate your joy. You are not alone too. We can be happy and joyous and have wonderful Thanksgiving, and we are with you, even as we know people are with us when we struggle and suffer. Because behind all of it, we are free, we are whole, and we are love. Each and every one of us, loving, lovable, love. To God be the glory, to the infinite wellspring of all life. To that is the glory and the joy that is here and now and for all eternity. Thank you, God. And so it is.
I walk in God in all I do. I walk in God in all that I